Well, Ben Napper has a brilliant way of keeping everyone on their toes, doesn't he? Welcome back, everyone. It's Jack Reeve, Talk Norwich City. Some big updates from Norwich City today. Ben Napper spoke to the press, Radio Norfolk, Pinkham, ITV Anglia, etc. And there were some punchy lines in there. The biggest of all is that Jack Wilshere will not be the next Norwich City head coach. It later came out from The Athletic and a couple of other sources that Jack Wilshere intends to leave the football club after the news that he won't be given that head coach role. Wilshere was given 2 games to prove himself against Middlesbrough and against Cardiff City. He went undefeated. He will leave Norwich City with an unbeaten managerial record. And I must say, I'm really surprised. I'm really surprised that he's not been given the full-time job. It felt like the safe choice. It felt like the obvious choice in some senses. And I thought it would be the choice that Ben Napper made. If you're not a Norwich City fan and you're tuning in and you're wondering on the kind of relationship between Ben Napper and Jack Wilshere, they worked very closely together at Arsenal. It was Ben Napper that brought Jack Wilshere to the football club. Johannes Hoftorp said that the intention was kind of always for Jack Wilshere to be promoted to head coach role when Johannes and Glenn left. Now, that process was kind of fast-tracked in a sense because I think most people thought that the point in which Johannes left Norwich City was going to be 1, after a couple of years, and 2, probably because he'd been poached by another club, not because he'd been sacked. So Wilshere kind of took the interim charge, and it was difficult to say whether it went well. It was a very small sample size, one of which being against the team that were already relegated. But Jack Wilshere was very punchy to the press and was very adamant that, 1, he was ready for the role, and 2, that he thought he'd done a good job and was kind of looking forward to what the future held. Well, his future probably won't be at Norwich City. Ben Napper came out to the press today and said that their look for a new head coach will come externally, and that ultimately the lack of experience from Jack Wilshere has meant that he won't be given this role. I liked the chat from Ben Napper. I thought it was very insightful. I thought it was passionate. I thought he spoke well, and he spoke with purpose. I think he knows the importance on the next appointment. This is a big appointment for him. It's a big appointment for the football club. As I've said before, I think you can get 1 managerial appointment wrong. You can't get 2 wrong as a sporting director. Ultimately, his first choice in Johannes Hoftorp failed. We aren't where we want to be. I'd say we probably regressed last season. We certainly did in terms of league position, and I think we probably did in terms of player development and such. So we are slightly behind where we wanted to be, and it feels like a really big call now for Ben Napper. The reason I thought that Wilshere was going to be given the role was for a few reasons. I didn't think that Napper would want to lose Wilshere, and it was pretty obvious that if he wasn't given the head coach role, Wilshere would be off because he thinks he's good enough and he's ready to do that. So I suspect he'll be looking elsewhere for that role. It felt like there was buy-in from the players with Jack Wilshere, and I think he would have kind of commanded a real respect and probably was quite an attractive proposition to play under Jack Wilshere. I thought the assignment of what he'd been kind of left in terms of the couple of games he had, he deployed himself pretty well, and ultimately at some stage a club has to take a punt on a young manager, whether that's Johannes or Alex Neil been in the past, or Daniel Farke. Like, all of these managers have come in ultimately with not much experience. Some work, some don't. And I thought that Ben Napper would take a punt on Jack Wilshere. Now, I'm happy that we haven't, because ultimately we kind of gave up on Johannes and decided that he wasn't the right option. And ultimately, a lot of that, I think, came down to lack of championship experience. A lot of the frailties and negatives that we ultimately felt under Johannes probably led back to him just not having that kind of experience at a championship level. And it was going to be a massive call if we went with Jack Wilshere. I did see a world where you start sluggish after 10, 15 games, he gets the boot, and then you're really scrabbling around and trying to find something. So this is a big call from Ben. I suspect it was a very difficult conversation to have with someone that he deems a close friend. Jack's came out in the media and said that he wants the job. He's not been given the job by a good friend of his. And that will be tough to take. And he now has to weigh up his future opportunities. I think that the way he speaks, and I think the early impressions is that I think he will go on to become a good coach. But in the context and where Norwich are at the moment, Ben Napper and the wider group felt that wasn't the right call. And now attention turns to, well, who will be our next head coach? And there has been literally zero chatter around the potential. You can obviously look at the bookmakers' odds, but that holds little weight. We spoke about the obvious names a couple of weeks ago before, Jack Wilshere had taken charge, Russell Martin and Gary O'Neill and Cooper, etc., the obvious names. I suspect that, I know that Napper and that wider group will have a short list of names, and I suspect they're already fairly progressed on where they're at with that. He made it very clear that they will definitely have a permanent head coach in well before the pre-season starts. I guess the good thing with having a kind of sporting director role like we've got with Ben Napper is ultimately he heads up the recruitment, so you can kind of pick and place head coaches, and the system and the infrastructure around the football club at the moment isn't based on individuals. It's based on an ideology and a philosophy. And you can pull people out of that and put new people in, and ultimately the mission and the objectives are very much the same. So there shouldn't be too much goes wrong in that sense. But it was a really punchy interview from Ben Napper. It was one where he said, look, top six is the objective. He made it very clear that was the objective for Johannes. He made it very clear that had been communicated, and a club like Norwich City, it's almost an unwritten rule that if we're in the Championship, we are looking for top six hopes, and we fell in the end very short of that last season. Lots of chatter around Josh Sargent, Borja Sainz, Marcelino Nunez. He's confirmed that there's a lot of interest in those players. I don't think it takes a rocket scientist to figure that out. I think we'll do well to keep those guys. I think we will keep one of them, and I think we've got a chance of keeping Marcelino Nunez. I don't see a world where we keep Borja Sainz or Josh Sargent. I hope I'm wrong. Sargent will be very difficult to replace. I think if we get the right money for Borja Sainz, I'm not as fussed about that. Equally with Marcelino Nunez, I think he's a very important player to keep around the place. I think he's really kind of flourished and developed under, now he knows a system that he's playing under. There was interesting chat around Jacob Wright. It looks like he will definitely be brought in, which is good. He sounded hopeful around maybe bringing Lewis Dobbin back into the group. And he said he was disappointed about the comments from Angus Gunn saying that he only had a 2-minute kind of chat with Ben Napper before being let go. He said that was made clear quite a long while before Angus had left, that they weren't going to be renewing his contract and they were kind of weighing up options. That was it was a real chat of intent, I think, from Ben Napper. I like hearing him coming out with a chip on the shoulder is maybe not the right phrase, but he was firing. You could tell that he was up for this job, and that he will do everything in his power to get this right. He understands the pressure. He knows the pressure, and he knows that these next decisions have to be right. I like the way that Napper communicates when he does. He's very much keeps himself to himself, and then when he's when he's given a chance to chat to the media, he certainly doesn't hold back, and I like that about Napper. There's a real kind of desire to push forwards, and look, we'll see if these decisions are right. He's made a big call on sacking Johannes. He's made a big call on not employing Jack Wilshere. I think ultimately both of those decisions were correct, and ultimately both those problems came from Ben's decision. So it's really important we get this next one right. I want someone in that's proven, that's got experience, that has a philosophy and that ultimately, wants to prove themselves. That is a difficult option to fit, but Norwich should be an attractive proposition for managers. The infrastructure's there. There is money in the Championship for us to spend, and on the whole, it's a pretty talented squad. I'm looking at Bristol City and Coventry and Sunderland getting into the playoffs. Very little to choose between their squads and ours this season, and I guess it's damning on those in the squad, and also Johannes Hoftorp that they fell so very short. So it won't be Wilshere. It was short. It was sweet. We shall see how all of this plays out. I suspect we're going to hear lots more in the coming weeks. I would love to hear your thoughts on who you think the next head coach is going to be, and also who you want it to be. Down in the comment section below. Let me know. I am clueless as to the potential of the next head coach. I'm also stirring around who I want it to be and who it's likely to be, and I'm none the wiser. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. It is going to be a fascinating summer ahead at Norwich City, so please do lock in to Talk Norwich City for all of the latest updates and chat. Thanks very much for watching. Have a lovely weekend, and I'll see you all again very soon. Bye-bye.